Artist Talk. I am thrilled that you're on and super excited to share your story, your journey, and your works. And so let's jump right into it. But first, let me cover a couple standard issue matters here for us here at the museum. First, I want to welcome everyone once again to the Museum of Graffiti's Daily Art Talk, where we get to connect with artists who shape this art movement we call graffiti or writing. I'm Carlos Mayer, aka Mayer 139, and I have REMI Ruff live from London. God knows what hour it is over there. And so for the next hour, we're going to get into his history and talk to him about what he's been up to, how he's coping with this sudden change in terms of quarantine. But a little bit about him. He was born in London in 1971. He deals with visual semantics, distilling fragments of the world around him into powerful abstract compositions. Unlike pure abstract painters such as Malevich, Mondrian, Remi's pseudo-sculptural paintings and large-scale murals are instilled with a streetwise energy and tension born from early experiences as a young graffiti writer, painting on walls and trains across the world. We're going to explore all of this and how that's playing out for you. And so one of the first things I want to do in our conversation, Remi, and we know each other very well,
we
and
do
I want to
indeed.
share this with everyone. How are you coping with Corona in England and the lockdown, and how's this affecting your family, your creativity?
I mean, if I'm honest, I'm actually quite enjoying the lockdown. You know, most of us artists spend a lot of time by ourselves anyway, so it's nothing new. My wife was very ill with it for about nearly, I'd say, 3 weeks, and fortunately she's better now, so that's cool.
Great.
I had, I think, a very mild version, but the thing is, you know, without these tests you just don't know.
Absolutely.
Work-wise, literally everything just went over a cliff. But then weirdly, things just started to kind of pull together. And I've now got a show in September in Italy in a really amazing space with these really lovely people that got in touch with me literally about a week into the lockdown. I got an email like, hey, do you want to come do a show in northern Italy? And I'm like, what, sorry, where?
Well, none of this mattered to me from what we see on your Instagram feed. This hasn't stopped you. You had a little published book that you put out with some prints, new paperworks. And I want to jump right into the works that I think we're going to start this conversation with, the fantasy projects, right? The architectural projects, right?
Yeah.
Because this is something that is really fascinating to me. Tell me about this building and why you chose this building and this project.
Well, that's the Maxi Museum in Rome, designed by Zaha Hadid, who I had the fortune to meet a couple of times, because I was running a blog whilst she was having this huge show at the Design Museum in London. And I was completely blown away by her work previous to meeting her, and met her. She was lovely. I met some of her key staff who were amazing. And it really switched me into architecture in a way that I'd never really kind of engaged with previously, even though I'd spent my entire life painting buildings. And Zaha Hadid just really opened my mind to the possibilities of what you can do with a building. And, you know, I can't leave the house. We're all in quarantine. We're all staying in our houses other than shopping and dog walking. And I just thought, fuck it, I'm going to start photoshopping murals on dream buildings. And I've done 20 so far, I think.
This one's fantastic. So this relationship between this new language that you have, this is kind of an extension of the folding forms. It lends itself to contemporary architecture, doesn't it?
I'd like to think it does. I mean, I'm sure some of the architects would see this and go, oh my God, you know, what have you done to my building? But I mean, I'm trying to be, I mean, what's the word? I'm trying to be respectful to the design and the architecture and the space, but still kind of covering it with REMI-isms. This is the Fundación Ibere Camargo in Porto Alegre in Brazil. And it's a museum, but I mean, there's just the staircase, it's just amazing. So I did quite a lot of research. I basically filled my desktop with all these amazing buildings, found as high res versions of them as I could, and then just started photoshopping on top of them.
Has any museum or anyone contact you regarding the potential?
The Maxi Museum just sent me a message saying we really love it. Thank you. That was it. And to be honest, that was enough. That was the Denver Art Museum. Yes. Halo weird. And from that, another friend of mine who is an architect based in Hong Kong basically sent me this building that you're showing now and said, can you do a render on this? And yeah, sure. Kind of briefed me and said, can you do it, maybe in grayscale, monochrome? So that might be a possible job out of it when life gets back to some weird kind of version of normality. Who knows?
Does making these fantasy projects, does it inspire you in any way to, I guess, envision designing a building, perhaps?
Oh God, yeah. I'm constantly drawing what I would like to think would be buildings. I mean, I've no idea how to go from designing the outside to the inside. I'm like, how do you do that? How do they do that? How do architects do that? How do they design the outside of a building and know what's happening on the inside? I can't even get my head around that. But I mean, to be honest, that's still, the outside is always the starting point, I guess, because visually you walk up to a building, that's the first thing you see. But yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd love to design a building.
I'm constantly sending you architecture. You and I
Yeah, yeah.
Years.
I'm always sending you stuff.
Because I can see you operating in this space. And it's not unusual to think of, in this day and age, of a graffiti artist conceptualizing a graffiti building. It's been proven already with the Hive building in Brisbane.
Yeah.
That's a real breakthrough. But also some of the Europeans were thinking on this in the early in the 90s, wasn't it, or the 2000s?
And I mean, even kind of from a more architectural point of view, when you see stuff like Delta's furniture, and he's thinking about the space and the utilitarianism of that. And he's still graph, but it's his version of something very new. Hey, Derm, what's up?
Derm.
Agents of Change.
So I like this one, because I personally, I like how you find the right spaces to apply your image. You're not overly aggressive about the spaces, and in this one it really just caps it off quite nicely.
So this is the Koenig Gallery in Berlin, and I love this building. I actually went to visit it a few years ago, but it was closed, so I never got to see the inside, but I got to see the outside. And I was looking at photos of this building, and I came across this one, and it just looked like the dot on an I. It's simple as that. I just thought it's a punctuation. So to me, I thought, well, there's all this space that I could play with, but that's really the only space I need to play with. So,
well, what I like, in this section, we were really going to dig into your work, because from fantasy to reality, you've done so many great buildings, right? The image we're looking at now is King's Cross in England, the train station.
Yeah.
And the building you're looking at is the Magaro Hotel.
Yeah.
And that's an Agents of Change project.
Yeah, me.
Tell us about it.
So that was me, Augustine Coffey, LX1, and our amazing friend Steve Moore, who is just an amazing artist. In fact, there's a Steve Moore piece right there. Little Doze piece as well. yeah, so we did that in 2012, which was the year of the Olympics in London. So it's kind of mad because the influx of human beings into London during that time period, and I think we finished it in April, and the Olympics started in June. So that period was literally people arriving into London, and it's right in front of the Eurostar from Paris and King's Cross Station, which brings in all the trains from the north of England. So it was, yeah, it was insane. I've heard many times it's the most photographed mural in London. And as far as I know, it's the biggest mural in central London. I know there's a couple of other people who claim, but I mean, you've stood in front of it, so you know how
Yeah,
big it is.
well, one of the things that fascinates me about it is that it's not a flat building. It's a Georgian style architecture.
No, yeah, it's
And
Georgian.
it must have
It's
been super difficult to paint.
Well, the trick is to have a Frenchman across the street on a walkie-talkie, and if you have that, you're set.
So you continue to paint buildings. I came across this one, and
That's an oldie.
it's an oldie, yeah. And I could see that in this painting, you're really kind of sorting out the language of the future for yourself.
Yeah. So I think that the colors for me are very graph. I think that the one of the aesthetics that I've kind of taken through into my fine art world is the use of color and the aesthetics of color. And I've always tried to maintain that within the work. And at that point, that image was in Bristol actually. And a funny story about that is that I got asked to paint at this festival, which is kind of known for like a lot of up and coming people. And the guy who was organizing it for me said, do you want to do this? I was like, yeah, okay, as long as I don't have to paint with any Muppets or toys, whatever whatever the word is this week, which was I didn't mean it in a horrible way. But he forwarded that exact message to the organizer of the event, who then emailed me and went, "Don't worry, we won't have any Muppets for you." But yeah, the language was all quite new then. I was looking at Mondrian and I was looking at Van Doesburg a lot.
Yeah,
There's a
that
lot.
clearly comes through.
Oh,
Yes.
totally. I'm obsessed with Van Doesburg and
Just
Mondrian.
just to remind folks, we are live with Remy Ruff from London, and we're talking about his murals and his relationship with his art aesthetic and architecture. Now, this isn't Photoshop. This is a real building.
No, that's real. That's in Jacksonville. That's a corner of a parking garage that I did last year with these lovely people called Art Republic in Jacksonville, and hopefully I'm back out there with them at some point in the not too distant future.
You've done countless murals. Have you kept a count
I've
as to
done a few.
how
No
many
idea.
you've done?
A lot. I once did a count of how many graffiti pieces I did, and I got to like I think 4,900, and this was like mid 2000s. And I just thought, oh man, I can't keep up with counting this. I just do the work, Carlos. It's it's not about how much, or I just want to keep working. I just want to be working. I enjoy working. If I didn't do this, I don't know what I'd do. So I keep busy.
Tell me about this commission piece here.
So this was fantastic. This is the biggest singular thing I've ever done myself. This is in Richmond, Virginia. It's the Virginia Commonwealth University Honors Building. And the nice thing about this gig is it was just it's in such a focal point of Richmond, which isn't that big a town actually. It's a really nice small town. I'd never been there before, and it's quite interesting because when I did this, they were pulling down all the statues of kind of Robert E. Lee and all these kind of controversial figures from the late early 19th century, and there was the dean of the university, who was clearly Jewish, and his wife, and this really rather nice gay chap who lived locally, who was friends with the dean, who every day would come and visit me, and sometimes bring me, like, you know, coffee and stuff. And they were so anti all these statues being pulled down, and I'm like, so crazy. You're not the type of people I would imagine care about these statues. But, you know, it kind of gave me an insight into the history and the importance of Richmond, and its kind of its place in history, and its place in being quite a strategic city within that whole narrative.
Right. Does that play into, you know, your design at all? I mean,
Well, completely. I mean, the colors, I kept the red and blue as a kind of theme. You know, I didn't want to kind of go off piece and start doing like this crazy color. I wanted to kind of do something that was minimal but maximal.
so is that kind of a little political thing, like Republican, Democrat?
Yeah, totally.
What's interesting about this, folks, it's such a nice long shot of the building, and the the starkness of the blue and red. I mean, in between it, of course, you have the, you know, the dashing light blue and the fluorescence and the folds, the folding suggestion, which is signature for you. But this, it's interesting that you should put that into context about that place in history. It's interesting because there's something about you in your work that's so conscious of placement and place. And in particular, like this image in Morocco, we spent time in Morocco, and it's we both really love it, enjoy it. It's such a beautiful place with a deep ancient history, and you know the rose sand and the rose sandstone rather. It's quite interesting when you do these very stark graphic murals.
Well, I want the space to breathe. I want the wall to breathe. Even I think through doing graffiti, I understood the need for knowing to stop when enough is enough. There's an amazing graffiti writer that I used to paint with called Cries from Birmingham. Literally one of the best writers Britain's ever produced, in my personal humble opinion. And this guy, we would literally have to keep an eye on him and get to a point where we had to take the cans off him, because otherwise he'd just keep going. And it taught me a lesson. And it's something I always learned from watching Futura paint. Futura knows exactly the point to stop. And I studied this. I looked at how he created this kind of space where he knew, I need to stop now. And it's something that you really need to push yourself to kind of understand when to stop. And
but let me ask you something, because most of your murals are premeditated, right? You illustrate them first.
Yeah.
You're very methodical and engineer to spec. So you leave very little room for improvisation unless it's on canvas sometimes.
As Augustine Coffey would say, stick to the plan. Do not veer from the plan. Keep your life simple. And that's it. You know, it's like, these are big things to commit to. These are big things to do. This is, you know, the energy it sucks out of you doing these things.
Yeah.
You really don't want to make your life more difficult. You know,
No,
you want to make your life as easy as possible. So.
Well, but there's also something really interesting about the simplicity and the impact of the work. I remember when I saw you in Rabat, and you were doing this for the museum, and Museum you can explain.
Mohammed VI. Mohammed
VI, yes, correct.
Yeah.
And the simplicity and how it just lent itself to the environment, right? To the beautiful architecture, the all white, and here you have this eloquent, beautiful, geometric design. Simplicity.
I think again, I just needed, I needed a conveyance to do what I needed to do, and I wanted, and people always know me for lines and, you know, folding forms, and you know, my work is geometric, and you know, circles are as geometric as straight lines, you know, because a circle is within four, you know, it's within a square. It's the perfect encompass within a square. So all of those mathematical problems and solutions come out in the work. So circles are really important to me as much as straight lines.
As are the folds, right?
Yeah.
There's this one is in Dubai, which is quite
so
beautiful.
That's actually a prism. That wall is, there's three walls, so there's two walls behind that wall in a prism shape, and they built it specifically for me. And I went out with Yes B, who you've met, who is like my go-to guy, one of the most amazing style writers in the UK. I would probably say in the top three. But he's probably the only person I know who can paint a REMI piece without me even being there. He's so tuned with it. He's done so many projects with me. He did actually most of this because I was really suffering from the heat. So he kind of took over and just said, okay, you know, he knew exactly what was going to go where. But again, challenges, you know, painting in the heat like Morocco. You know, that wall you showed, the first Marrakesh wall, I mean, we were literally being destroyed by the heat when we did that.
Yeah, Marrakesh is I have to say unforgiving with.
Yeah.
I remember when
but we love it.
Yeah, when the Agents of Change went and did this mural. But you know what's beautiful is like the community, when they see you out there painting and enduring the heat and leaving something behind for them. It was wonderful, the responses the engagement people had with us.
Yeah, I think I just love the people there. You know, all the kids that I've met, Basek, Normal, Edwan, you know, I mean, they're not kids, they're men, but, you know, they're kids to us. And I mean, the warmth and the friendship that I get from those guys, even now, you know, I haven't seen them for a couple of years, and you know, Facebook, they hit me up, Remy, you know, come and visit us.
Let me ask you something. That reception, do you find, because you're an international artist, you've been all over the globe.
Yeah.
This kind of reception, is this common for you as an artist?
I mean, I treat people with the same kind of respect that I expect people to treat me with, and I never really have any issues. I mean, everybody's, you know, I get on with everybody. So, you know, I go with an open mind, you know, I go with no preconceptions, totally open-minded. I'm happy to just be a part of whatever's going on, if it's a mural project or whatever. So yeah, mostly I'd say, yeah.
So I want to take you back to the graffiti years. And when you were just kind of sorting it out, right?
Oh yeah,
Let me just go back one.
Yeah, that's pretty early. That's 87. Pretty much pure buntlack, apart from the black, I think.
Now, tell me about, again, you know, and as brief as you can, because we're going to go through a bunch of these. What was influencing you? Because by that time, obviously, Style Wars had come out, Subway Art had come out. I don't know if had Subway Spray Can Art come out yet?
No, Spray Can Art was after this. So Spray Can Art wasn't out at this point. We had Subway Art. I remember a kid bringing it into school and I borrowed it. Cat matches colour. Hello, chap. And basically, I got graffiti from my head because all I knew was what was in Subway Art, and there was only a limited amount of resource that you could like pilfer before people were like, yeah, that's not really yours, is it? So I think in London, in the UK at that time, you really had to push to be quite original, and that's why you had these quite stylistic kind of jumps, like the Chrome Angels and Goldie, and you know, people they made quite big stylistic jumps from New York style, and I think that was because we felt you've got to do something new. You can't just regurgitate, you know, the stuff in New York.
Right. Well, this art piece is a kind of atypical of the New York style.
Kind
except
of, yeah.
except for the fill-in. I mean, I could see the influences, perhaps, of Chrome Angels,
Yeah, you know, the
Futura, of
flared
course,
letters. That was this. So this is 88, and you
88.
know, I didn't have a lot of paint. I didn't, you know, I got what I could when I could. So I had like, I would be very, like you're saying, I'm methodical. I was very methodical with how yes, Jerry, we know about the hair. Thank you. I was very methodical about how I would use my paint. And then I met Juice in 89 and I learned how to mix paint. So then suddenly I've got like pinks, dusty pinks, mauves, which was interesting. And this, yeah, so this is 89. So I was painting abstracts in 89. I was very influenced at that point by Juice 126, by Locus, Ski, who's a very important artist in my, I would say, kind of repertoire of influences.
Yeah, this is
And
interesting in that it's how would you categorize this style, this kind of
freestyle,
amorphic kind of forms?
I used to call it orgasmetrolysis. That was the name, and our crew was VOP, Visual Orgasm Productions. I went to Paris in '89, and I met I met up with Locus. I met John One, who's been one of my friends literally since 1989. We're still good friends, and John One, Mio, and J1, and all these other amazing artists in Paris were doing these freestyle walls, and they'd never plan anything. They would just turn up with a bag of paint, and there was this one wall which was just freestyle abstraction. And I don't know who did it, but one of the crew just put the Kodak logo in the middle of it. And everyone thought it was a commission for Kodak, and it wasn't. They just were like, fuck it, we're going to put the Kodak logo in it. And that kind of approach I brought back to London. Juice had been following a lot of these guys anyway. And me, myself, Juice, another artist called Cam, we just started really breaking out of uniform graph. And to be honest, I've never been that comfortable with the conformities of graffiti. I've always thought it's a rebellious art form. How
But you did it well. When you painted trains in the UK, you obviously had style. You had the formula locked in already.
But then once you've kind of done that, then what? You know, you do it again and again and again, and I got bored. I got
I
bored
mean,
of painting
true,
my
but
name.
you were experimenting with a lot of different styles, which I liked. And even you started in this image on the top, you started experimenting with the 3D style, which seems to me that that's probably being influenced by Germany.
Again, I was hanging out with Lumit a lot. I was in Munich. Lumit was coming and staying at my house. Lumit and I did, I don't know, we done like 5-6 walls together. And then Dime is a good friend of mine, and we were exchanging ideas and letters together. So, you know, all these influences were coming in. And I think, I mean, I was one of the first London writers doing 3D. Yeah, I'm sure someone's going to pull me up about that, but I was one of them. You know, if there was like 4 or 5, I was definitely in there. Definitely not the first, but I was really intrigued with what you could do with this art form, and where you could take it. So I was always happy to try different things and you know.
Well, one of the things, before we get into this piece, I want to welcome everybody to the Museum of Graffiti's daily artist talk. We're
Hey,
joined
Mike.
we're joined by REMI Ruff, live from London, and we're discussing at this point his graffiti style pieces. And this one you did with the infamous Banksy.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Please indulge us. And
so I thought this was interesting to send you, because everyone has this idea of him as a stencil guy. The gorilla is completely hand painted. The television is completely hand painted. The only stencils are the Banksy tags in the background, and he just had it in the car because I was looking out for him as he was doing stencils around London. So we kept all his shit in the boot of my car. And he was like, well, go and get that and we'll do it as a background. I'm like, yeah, sure. So the idea was we did this piece, it said Dogma, which obviously is, you know, I mean, kind of really relevant now. But we didn't want to write our names. We had this concept and we wrote, nobody ever remembers where they bury the hatchet because no one ever forgets, you know. So,
did you have an inkling that Banksy was going to become the Banksy we know today?
Not at that point. He was just Rob. We just go painting. We used to do quite a lot of illegal stuff as well. We did one on the train tracks, quite a mainline station in South London. It was there for so long. And we wrote, there's no money in this shit. I'm going into management. You know, and he always had these funny things to write. It's quite interesting because he was veering towards social commentary and kind of more narrative based stuff. Yeah. I was just a letterist. But he was like, no, we can make this work. We can bring humor into the letters. So the one we did on the train tracks, he made me write WUFF, WUFF. And people would be like, WUFF? What's WUFF? But it's rough, but just pronounced wrong. Right. So he kind of always helped.
But he was a letter writer, wasn't he? I mean, he
was a straight up meat and potatoes graffiti writer. You know, he just went a different avenue, much like you, much like me. And he gets a lot of slack from graffiti writers who are like, it's like, fuck off, man. He was doing graffiti before you were fucking born. You know, it's like, you kind of need to know. This is the problem with the world at large. It's like so many people don't really know the stories that get put out there into the larger world. But yeah, he was a graffiti writer.
Well, what gets lost is that we transition, right? We grow up, our ideas mature, and many of us decided to go into the studio.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the logical step.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to share with folks is your studio and your studio experience, because it's rather unique. Because in your studio, you often invite artists, your visitors, hey, let's just freestyle something on the wall. This one with Augustine Kofi. Tell me about the studio sessions that you have done.
I mean, people come to town. They're like, oh, let's do something together. I really don't want to be that guy who's kind of ringing up like, you know, graffiti wall people to get permission or that kind of shit. I've got space. The way I look at it, if we do it here, it's ours. We own it. No one can like put an advert or a website on it. It's about ownership and IP. And, you know, we always have this conversation about Absolutely. The ownership and the intellectual property. And it's a private space for private projects and for people to freestyle, going back to how, you know, BBC Crew and John One were doing stuff in Paris, you know, in the late 80s. It is that freestyle, you know, so like Moneyless, who's a really good friend of mine. This is Mac One. This was the first one we did, actually, me and Mac. We were talking about it for ages. And he's a portrait painter. So it's like you're really having to kind of meld with somebody who's doing something quite different. Love Pusher, we did
with the 3D style.
Yeah, you know, I did the J and the S's and he did the E and the U. So it says Jesus. It's just a letter piece. But I'd never really done my kind of folding style as letters. And it kind of worked. I should revisit that, actually. I never thought of it.
It is quite something to kind of open up
Kodak, Juice.
Yeah, to open up your space to, you know, for another artist. And
I mean,
how long
I'm
do you
quite
let them
fussy.
Live?
I mean, they live for as long as they live, you know, like the deal is everyone always kind of knows it's not permanent. It's my working space. You know, some of them have lasted a week. Some of them have lasted a couple of months, you know, not because I prefer them, or it's just if I need the space, if I need to work, I need to work. But, you know, we document them. We keep them. So everything's documented. That's the beauty about the world now. It's the documentation. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I over the years to watch you grow as a painter, not just in terms of your practice, but the ideas, how you articulate these ideas. And there was a point where you had a keen interest in abstract expressionism, the Franz Klein movement, and de Kooning and the Jackson Pollocks of that generation.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was really enjoying about the works at that time was that you still kind of left, the history of graffiti underneath these modern paintings.
Yeah. I think I was trying to, in my own way, say goodbye to that. It's like me buffing these pieces out. It's like the relevance didn't sustain for me anymore. And I had to move on. I've used this analogy, a lot of times. I did it in this video I just did for Chop 'em Down Films. But it's like the Beatles, and they made these little 3-minute love songs, like I Want to Hold Your Hand, Love Me Do. And they were like, 2 minutes 40 long, they all had this kind of formula. And then I know it was through a lot of kind of psychotropic drugs and whatever else, but they abstracted and they made Revolver and the White Album because they couldn't just carry on making these like 8-chord love songs.
Right.
And that's kind of what happened to me. I was so enthused with visual and with identity of artists and the things I was seeing and things people would show me. I remember Steve Moore ringing me up like, hey, let's go to the Courtauld Museum. There's a show with Mondrian and Ben Nicholson. And I'm like, who's Ben Nicholson? I didn't fucking know who Ben Nicholson was. I went and I'm like, oh my God, I love Ben Nicholson. Came home straight away. I buy a book. I bought 2 books, and then you start learning about these artists. You learn about how they built their careers, how they helped others. Like, I didn't know that Ben Nicholson, who was a lot younger than Mondrian, helped Mondrian reboot his career because he loved him so much. He was like, this artist is amazing. He's like, in Paris, no one's giving him a show. No one's giving him the time of day. He's like, fuck that. He's like, you come and stay with me and Barbara, and you come and stay with us in Cornwall. You can have the studio room to yourself, do whatever you need to do. I'll make introductions, and that filled me with inspiration, not just because of the work, but because of the philanthropy of this artist who was clearly really enthused by this other artist.
Right. And he was able to advance his theories and ideas.
Exactly.
Another artist you and I both discussed quite a bit, another period we both like, is this one. And I know a lot of people are looking at this black screen and saying, what is that?
I know exactly art, what it right? is.
Actually, what I'm referring to is Malevich.
Yeah.
And Malevich with the black square paintings of the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us young artists looking at this the first time, we're left scratching our heads. What does that mean? What does the void mean? What are we supposed to make of this, right? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, and my position as I've matured, and you and I have often had these art history talks, we both feel like art history is ours for our inheritance and for us to wrestle with and to reimagine. Yeah. And this is what you've done with Malevich. You've chosen him specifically in your career as a point of interest and departure. Let's talk about that.
Well, I love the fact he's always an outsider. He was always outside of the norm, and always, even within the kind of suprematist movement, he wasn't the kind of most trusted, go-to guy in it. He was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like this. He was often at odds with a lot of the people that he was working with. But it's also about his reactionary painting to the situation, and Russia at that point was in a mess. and you know, they were being drafted like as artists to design propaganda posters for the government. And he was just like, oh man, you know, what am I doing? And it forced him into this kind of mode of abstraction.
And well, what was what's your reasoning for, like, for instance, you have one of his classic suprematist paintings juxtaposed next to one of yours.
Yeah.
What inspired you? What was the motivation about
saw
responding?
I saw a painting of his at the Tate Modern, and I stood in front of it. There's two paintings in my life that have really literally sent me on new journeys, and one is Full Fathom 5 by Jackson Pollock, which is quite a pink, purpley portrait based painting.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat in front of it with Juice at the Tate Britain many years ago, and it blew my mind. And I knew then that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to make art in a studio. I wanted to create these kind of capsules of art, not just paint my name over and over again on walls to have someone paint over it 10 minutes later. You know, that was a pivotal moment. And then I saw this Malevich painting, I think 2006, in the Tate Modern, and I was just completely blown away by the composition. And I didn't really understand composition, so I went away and I read Kandinsky's book on line and point and composition, and I started to discover what composition means and how important it is. And you know, being a graffiti writer, I was using composition. I didn't even know I was using composition.
Yeah, I mean, it plays out, you know, in your career how much depth you have with, you know, compositions in space.
Well, I realized that what's not there is as important as what is there. Most graffiti writers have a rectangular wall. They will fill it with a rectangular piece, character there. It's so formulaic. I would take my piece and have like nothing in the middle, a small tiny letter there and a massive letter on the other side, and literally like a line that joins it. You know, that was my compositional, you know, fuck you, if you want. I didn't want to be part of that's gonna be the space, there's the edge. You know,
what's interesting, Remy, is that, you know, exactly what you're saying in terms even of how, you know, finding the edge and the space, being calculated about that. You shift gears and you start doing the folded series, right? Where these are very dynamic. They're moving. They're coming in and out of space. These you know, very sharp graphic paintings. And in this one, again, you come back to this idea of juxtaposing it with some element of graffiti. Of tagging.
It's funny, isn't it? You know, for somebody who claims he doesn't want anything to do with it, I do push it in a lot. It's why, you know, the folds to me are just wild style. It's minimalistic wild style. Like even the names, like the one on the right of these three here, I showed at Woolworks in New York just at the end of last year, and the one on the right is called Style Writer Extraordinaire. You know, so I can never really get that much away from it. And there's so much amazing resource, you know, within style writing and graph. But there's also so much more that you can take out of it. So I try and utilize everything, you know.
We often talked about this, about how, you know, the ideas of the early modernists were already baked into graffiti style writing. It's that we had to unfold it, and, as no pun intended, we needed to discover it.
I mean, I always say that graph is abstraction. You know, we took letters, we took typefaces, and we abstracted them. We added arrows where there weren't arrows. We added connections where there weren't connections. We turned these letter forms into completely abstract compositional pieces. And that always kind of gets missed out. You know, it's so fucking formulaic how people look at and refer to it and talk about it. And it to me, it's pure abstraction. Even the letter, you know, like throughout the 20th century, there were no artists who were using the letter as the key icon in their work. Yeah, I mean,
well, not the key
Jasper
icon,
Johns,
but you know, when Brock started doing the collages, that innovation, he was able to bring the typeface into the painting, and then Picasso followed suit, and then everybody else followed suit soon after.
But but still, it would, you know, ostensibly be a violin or whatever, you know.
Right.
Whereas this was just typography. It was, you know, and we've had this conversation, you know, of how important graffiti is as a movement. It's the only art movement in history ever created by and taken forward by children.
That's
and
correct.
You know, nothing else on the planet has that, which is also interesting because there's such a naivety to it. But within that naivety, there's a real element of beauty and accessibility because it's by kids. You know, like how old were you in Style Wars? You know, 14, 15? You were younger than Lily.
Yeah, I was about 15, 16.
Yeah. So you were a child.
That was naivety then. But I think the relationship I had with Henry and going to his studio and seeing these modernist sculptures, I started seeing graffiti in his sculptures. And then in 1980, when he and I went to the MoMA to see the Picasso show, that was just something that opened up the Pandora's box for me in terms of modernism and graffiti and those correlations, and then the deeper dive and curiosity about what was it like for an artist breaking ground in those years, right? And those were the war, you know, between two wars. So that was, you know, we've talked about, you know, how tension was necessary, I think, for graffiti to exist and evolve, just as modernism needed that tension as well.
It's always interesting. Would it have happened if it was 5 years later or 5 years earlier? You know, like it happened in New York when New York was completely broke. No one could afford to paint the trains clean. It came to Europe, came to Paris and London. We were in the midst of Thatcherism. You know, Britain was broken. So it kind of came at exactly the right time. You know, it's and you say this a lot. It's never really been written about properly. People write about it as a aesthetic. They don't write about it as a historical art movement, which I think is being missed.
Well, there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, I can't say I've read everything, but again, I've been privy to it in a very unique way, and I look at it in a multi-dimensional way. And this is why we have these talks, because I'm curious about artists like yourself and others who apply themselves to this and you know, find the reasoning, find the environment that gives this life, right? That moment in time that gives this life. Folks, I want to take some questions with REMI Ruff from you guys, and as we start winding down. And so please submit your questions for us. You are at the Museum of Graffiti, our daily artist talk. And before I do take a question, I want to do a plug, because you and your wife have a great cause going on. And
we do.
P-Joys. And given the state of Corona in our lives at the moment and the state of mental health, you guys teamed up to do this very special project. Tell us about it really quickly so I can get to some questions.
So my wife works in, as you know, in the space of mental health. And she wanted to basically put together a pajama company. It came out of her being in a very bad burnout. And she came out of it saying, I want to do a new project, a new company for purpose. And she started P-Joys. And it's pajamas that are designed by artists under the umbrella of mental health. They have like the number of the Samaritans in the labels, and it raises money for mental health charities and awareness. My wife also talks a lot, you know, all about mental health, and we got Dee's done this, mine on the right, and that's Augustine Coffee's on the left. I
Yeah, and
think
you
if
had
you're
Maxi
watching
as
it.
well.
Mad C has done a pair, also an amazing contemporary
Right.
artist called Nikki Hurst. Tristan Eaton's actually done a pair which at some point are going to happen. Zen's as well. So yeah,
Nice.
we've got a lot of people
Well, yeah, because
involved.
given the state of affairs at the moment, mental health is very important to a lot of us, especially to artists that depend on the economy of art and interaction with people. Remy, I want to take some questions.
Sure.
Worldwide Zeb asks, what subway riders inspired you? What systems you enjoyed the years you did them, and how was transitioning culturally to commission work?
Writers that really stood out to me were Dondi. I veered to all the left fielders: Dondi, Ramosi, Futura, A1. I was a huge fan of. I was very honored that he was a friend of mine. You know, I got to paint trains with him in Paris, and hung out with him a lot in the UK when he was over here. Crash, obviously, yourself. You know, I was, everybody who was making that work was part of me doing what I was doing. You know, no one more than anyone else. I always veered towards Lenny's work simply because, like I said, he had this innate ability to know when to stop.
A question from Michael Walsh. Have you considered applying your aesthetic to sculpture, possibly sculpture with geometric form painted on it?
I have done a few sculptures. What I don't have is the space and tools to make those. But I've definitely had a few good play arounds with sculpture, and it's always on my mind. And you're always telling me I need to do it as well. So maybe I just need to do it more.
I have a question from Lizzie Lines. Thank you. This has been so inspiring. How open is the graffiti? Pardon me, my reading is off. Basically, the question is about pricing your work. How do you price your work, and how did you manage to transition from public to paid work?
Pricing work. I mean, that's hard. You talk to galleries that you work with. You get advice from good people. You build your reputation over decades. And I think you have to just believe in what you do, and you have to build it with the right people.
Yeah, and again, I one of the things I admire about you is that you're so proactive with your career. You publish your own books, your own products. You make yourself available to people.
Yeah, I'm not very good at anything else.
Bella Makina asks, will Banksy ever come out, or do you think he'll keep the magic alive and remain anonymous?
I thought he was going to come out when they got the nomination for the what do you call it?
Exit from the gift shop.
Exit through the gift shop. What's the big awards? My mind's gone blank.
The Oscar.
The biggest. That's it. When they got the nomination for the Oscar, I thought he might come out, but he didn't. So I don't know. Probably not. Maybe one day. Who knows?
Okay. Ola San Diego asks, what is your favorite medium?
My favorite medium is making art. Full stop.
Nice. Murals in the Market asks, if you could collaborate on a mural project, with who would it be?
Oh, I always wanted to do one with Futura. I think our styles would it would be like a battle. I'd love to do something with Doze, because again, I think the styles would really work. Oh my, there's just too many artists to mention. There's so many artists I love. I really want to do something with Tristan Eaton. You know, we've been talking about that for God knows how long.
Patrick McQuaid asks, do you still consider yourself a graffiti artist without using fonts?
Not really. No, I don't. I am just an artist. You know, I make art. I don't consider myself categorized anymore like I did when I was 18, or, you know, I always say it's part of my story, but it's not necessarily who I am now.
Right. Just With Kid asks, have you ever found yourself in a rut? And if so, how do you work yourself into a new style?
All the time. I read, I look at books, I go out to galleries, I try very hard to keep my mind actively visual. And living in a city like London's amazing for that, because you just walk out the door and the architecture is all around, brutalist buildings everywhere from the 60s. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, but you also travel a lot, so that is...
Yeah. And I take photos, wherever
You
I
do.
go.
You're very engaged in the world, which I like. It's one of the things that I think for both of us, because I live vicariously through you sometimes. It's so beneficial because we have these exchanges about the world and the things we see in it, and how we would imagine ourselves in it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've been friends so long as well that we do have we know each other quite well, so we know what each other likes and wants to engage with.
I like pushing you. I like, because I see things in you that I can't find in myself, and I like, again, because this is in the tradition of collaboration with art. This is how we are as writers. We, from the trains to the walls to the studio.
But we've done amazing collabs together. Which the world hasn't seen.
We have Rodriguez 5 asking, Remy, big fan of yours from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Have you ever thought of teaching on some of your techniques? And when are you going to do a big mural in Sao Paulo?
When somebody invites me to Sao Paulo, I will definitely go and do a nice mural. And no, I'm never, ever going to give my secrets away.
You know what? I don't think that's true, because your technique is out there. I've seen the video.
Yeah, it's.
Listen, we have 1 minute and 40 counting down, because Instagram is going to cut us off.
That just goes so quick.
It does. There's a lot we've left out, folks.
It was brilliant.
Remy has a phenomenal breadth of work that is worth discovering. So go to his Instagram at Remy Ruff or RemyRuff.com. So with that, Remy, as always, you and I will continue this conversation.
Indeed, mate.
And I'm glad we kind of, we're able to kind of throw a curveball into my program here, because yes, this is about style writing and graffiti, but these are bigger conceptual stuff that you and I have discussed for years, whether it's architecture, technology, and modernism. I think it's worth knowing that we're not alone in that conversation. There are many of us who are in that conversation, but we don't want to be pigeonholed into the simplicity. Oh, you just scroll your name on the wall and you do letters.
There's too much other stuff to do as well. Too much.
Well, that said, Remy, I want to thank you, as always.
Thank you,
for
mate.
everything you have done for me as a friend, everything you do for the culture. You're a great ambassador, and you continue to push the boundaries of your own work. And I think you're leaving behind a tremendous legacy.
You're very kind, mate.
All right, everybody, thank you. Join us tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
We have Claw Money joining us tomorrow, so that should be raucous. She's a very engaging and fun.